Alright, so yeah, it looks like one of the absolute core features of Space Marine 2 is going to be changing in the long term, because the game director just came forward and asked a big question to the community, which has stirred up quite the response. Also, can we expect a public test server for update 10.0? And what about the possibility of a new class like the Terminator? And some more questions answered about the next season pass. So yeah, a lot to go over. Remember, if you are new, welcome aboard. Smack that subscribe button to stay up to date and in the know about all things Space Marine 2. And if you want, leave a like for the algorithm. Alright, so I say we hop into the brand new blog post from our game director of Space Marine 2, and he's asking about contested health. And you can actually go out here and actually vote for what you would like to see and what changes you want to see in the future for this basically core mechanic of Space Marine 2. But I wanted to read over this blog post together and get an idea of what potentially could be changing up here, because it seems like it could be a very significant change to how we play Space Marine 2. So let's dive in here. So it says, hello Space Marines. Today we'd like to hear your thoughts on the balance of contested health recovery. Since the game's release, a misconfiguration in contested health recovery values has meant that ranged weapons restore far too much contested health, while melee weapons restore far too little. Nearly a year has passed since launch, and by now everyone is used to playing with this incorrect setup where ranged weapons recover much more health than melee weapons. To be honest, it's been bothering me since day one. I'm looking at you, Plasma Pistol. And now that we've addressed some of the bigger and easier PvE balance issues, we'd like to tackle this lingering one. We could have adjusted the values at any point over the past year without asking, but I worry that you have become so accustomed to the current state that even a small positive change could cause a strong negative reaction. After all, the game is perfectly playable and fun as it is, but we believe there's still room for improvement. My big question is, how are you guys feeling about contested health recovery, and how would you like to see it potentially changed? But we've got to read on here and see what the game director further had to say. He says this: any adjustment to contested health recovery will significantly affect the game's balance. Ranged combat will become more challenging, while melee combat will become easier, more forgiving, and more brawl heavy. This will shake up the entire meta across weapons, perks, and classes. So I'm kind of curious to see if Space Marine 2 becomes more melee centric, especially because we are going to be getting brand new melee weapons in the future. So perhaps that's what they're looking into, and they're wanting melee weapons to matter even more. Which, by the way, I really do hope they continue adding in a bunch of melee weapons. It's by far one of my favorite things to engage with. But yeah, seeing something like lightning claws added to the game would be absolutely badass. I'm just saying. Alright, so next up we have this right here. Contested health is a core mechanic that helps mitigate player mistakes and, more importantly, reduces the number of finishers needed to stay alive, making players invulnerable during finisher animations, unlike in the original Space Marine. I love Space Marine 1, it's one of my favorite games of all time, but being killed mid-finisher was frustrating, and the number of finishers required for survival could feel repetitive. With invulnerability during finishers, dying would be nearly impossible given how frequently they're performed, so it makes sense that finishers are absent from Space Marine 1's Exterminus mode. And being able to recover quickly by executing an enemy and regaining most of your lost HP keeps you in the fight instead of retreating to wait for armor to regenerate, which can break the game's power fantasy. Now, the difficulty with contested health recovery is that it's a complex system influenced by many factors: damage dealt, the current melee attack, chosen difficulty, area of effect, number of targets hit, and more. Even a small tweak risks breaking something unintentionally and may require hotfixes. Hopefully PTS will be able to alleviate this, but I must warn anyone that it might introduce some new issues. So yeah, the good news here is that we would be getting a brand new public test server here eventually in the future, but he didn't say exactly when to expect that. However, out on the official Discord, we did get a reply from one of the Focus community managers who did say the following right here. Check it out. Here's the question: will there be a PTS 4 10.0? And the answer is no, there won't. So at the very least, we do know now that when we get that public test server, it would most likely drop after update 10.0. But again, that goes without saying that a lot of this stuff can change. Who knows, maybe they would surprise us with a PTS 4 update 10.0. I'm just saying, don't hold your breath. Now, this is where some of the controversy comes into play here, and I'll get into some of the community responses about this as well. Check it out right here. It says, we also can't simply buff melee contested health recovery, as that would make the game too easy and absolute difficulty is already not particularly punishing. So any melee buff would have to be paired with a reasonable nerf to ranged contested health recovery. So that leaves us with the question: do you want us to adjust contested health recovery globally, reducing it for ranged weapons, but increasing it for melee weapons? Please note, changes to this mechanic will require extensive internal testing and will take some time. Even with positive results, these adjustments will not appear in patch 10. And this vote is going to be ending in 9 days, by the way. I'll throw that link in the description below. Remember, you have two choices here. Yes, I want contested health recovery to be increased for melee and reduced for ranged weapons, or no, I want contested health recovery to stay the same as it currently is. But oh boy, did this have quite the reaction from the community as we head on over to the actual thread about this on the subreddit. Check out some of the replies here. So any melee buff would have to be paired with a reasonable nerf to ranged contested health recovery. Whack. Unsure why this would change the balance that much, as you can't shoot and melee at the same time. And the response here, why not just increase melee contested health recovery? Nobody loses, everybody wins. Now, someone did reply and they got -3 downvotes. They said why, because it would make the game too easy. But yeah, obviously a big part of the community is saying, hey, you know what? When you make these changes, just touch the melee health recovery. We want that buff, but whatever you do, leave ranged health recovery alone. And yeah, we also have further replies right here. Wow, those are pretty crap choices, all things considered. Health recovery in the game kind of blows chunks already, and I'm not sure what they're implying, saying absolute isn't punishing at higher difficulties. The game is more infuriating than anything. But yeah, how many of you guys are actually in absolute difficulty right now, considering that there aren't any like big challenges going on around that mode, perhaps any like big cosmetic rewards? I'm very curious how many of you guys are actually in that difficulty right now. But anyway, it's obvious that there's going to be some very big changes around how contested health recovery works. I just hope that the dev team is very cautious about their approach with this one, but I am glad to hear that they will be obviously doing some sort of PTS around this first before they really implement it, and getting your feedback before really cementing a final change here. All right, so I say we head on over to the official Space Marine 2 Discord, where we did get some very interesting responses about what's going on around the next season pass. Also, yes, would we see a Terminator class? And we're going to talk a little bit about the Techmarine, but let's start out with this question right here. Check it out. We have this. Hi, Leah. In the community update, you mentioned fewer updates in August. Does this mean we won't get a community update for August? And the response is this right here, as she goes on to reassure, no worries. You'll get a community update in August, and a good one again, I think. So that's very good news. I'm going to count down the days until that one arrives. Remember, that usually happens at the end of every month, and I'll have that here on the channel. Don't worry. Also, we have another question. Any word on the possibility like new classes like the Terminator, which has been highly requested? A lot of you guys would love to see the Terminator, and the response is straight up negative on that one, which kind of got a reaction from those online at the time. Here's one of them. So Techmarine is going to be the only new class, which would suck because I want apothecary cosmetics. And of course, we have a follow-up to this. You're jumping to conclusions. There's no other classes planned for the moment, that's for sure. That doesn't mean there will never be another new class. Let's be hopeful. So yeah, right now in the pipeline that's currently being worked on is that Techmarine. And we did get a little bit of insight as to what's going on around the Techmarine currently, so you guys know. But start out with a question here. Sister, out of curiosity, how long ago did the Techmarine team start designing it? When I worked at another company, it took us months. Here's the response. A while back, like months, but it's still not polished enough even to show in a work in progress asset. So yeah, it seems like it has a little bit of ways to go. So if you're expecting like the Techmarine to drop with update 10, I wouldn't hold your breath on that one exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, that would be absolutely amazing. But yeah, developing an entirely new class and then alongside that, developing Turok Origins, well, it's gonna take a little bit of time here. And I gotta say, I really do hope that it's worth the wait. And I do hope that we get some new cosmetics alongside the Techmarine. That would be really badass too. But we also have some questions about the next season pass. Check it out right here. Yo, Sister Hylia. Serious question. It says there will be brand new chapters as well as returning chapters. Will we have to pay for the additional content for returning chapters? or will be included in the original season pass. Sorry if I worded this weirdly. And we got the response from Sister Hylia, who goes on to say this: new chapters will be part of the second season pass. And there was also some strange confusion about how season passes actually work in Space Marine 2. There were some people that said, hey, you know what? I already bought the season pass. Why do I have to buy anything else? Well, remember, when you're buying a season pass, you're only buying that season. That's 1 year. So season 1 is done for. However, there were some really important notes here. In fact, this was mentioned right here. When you bought the Ultra Edition, you bought a season pass, 1 season pass for a season. And most importantly, as others mentioned, if you want a specific cosmetic that's part of the season pass, you can just purchase it on the side. You don't have to buy the whole pass. So that is always going to be an option, and they do not want to do anything in regards to FOMO or anything like that. But yeah, I gotta say, year 2 is shaping up to be, very interesting. We'll see how this one plays out. I really do hope that the next PTS goes well, and that we really do like whatever change they commit to when it comes to, of course, whatever they do with contested health recovery. Yeah, you know what? I say do not nerf range weapon health recovery, contested health recovery. I think that would be a huge negative to do any type of, limiting in that regard. I think players would not be very happy with that whatsoever. We'll see what happens again with that feedback in the public test realm. But yeah, guess what? Now it's time to go over your top comments. Remember, leave a comment down below. It can end up right here in a future video. And if you are new, welcome aboard. Don't be afraid to smack that subscribe button to stay in the know and update on all things Space Marine 2. But let's do this. See what you guys had to say here. We have this one right here. Black Templar as Bulwark actually makes sense. So yeah, at the very least, it seems like Focus actually got that one right here. Now, next up we have, adding the Flamethrower after adding the Salamander Champion on a Sniper. I can feel the cries of many voices in the force. Seriously though, unless they add more champion packs, I've already done chapters in different classes. For example, a second Salamander Champions pack could release, but this time it's for, I don't know, the Heavy? Anyways, unless they do that, people will still be unhappy with any other possible future odd decisions. Yeah, that would make up for a lot right there if they could just fix some of those past mistakes in regards to those champion packs for sure. Now we have Flamethrower. Me and my Salamander brothers will be properly equipped now. So yes, the Salamanders are very much celebrating. And we have, I'm still waiting on more news about the champion cosmetic cross class they mentioned a few months ago. They were asked about that on the Discord, and they mentioned they have nothing yet to say about that. That is very much work in progress right now. So hopefully, in time we get some more solid, blog posts about it or first looks at that type of thing that's coming to Space Marine 2. I think that one is going to be a very, very big update to the game and bring back a lot of players for sure. Now we have, I'll say it's getting old, being told we fixed unlocking, and we fixed some connectivity issues, but it ends up being worse than before. We need to start getting details on what is getting fixed before it seemed like nothing is actually being done. Yeah, they keep vaguely mentioning in a lot of the patch notes that release that, hey, connectivity has been addressed and so on and so forth. But, again, I leave it to you guys. It's so hard to judge if this sort of thing has been improved. So let me know how you guys are feeling about it. For me personally, I'm having no major connectivity issues. I really haven't with Space Marine 2. However, only in siege mode. That is where I have actually had problems. But when it comes to things like operations, I don't get any disconnects, anything like that. For the most part, I've had a pretty good time with connectivity. I don't know if I'm in the minority or not. You guys are going to have to let me know. But anyway, there it is. The latest happenings around Space Marine 2. As always, thank you guys so much for the love and support. It looks like the news will be ramping up finally as we start to head into September eventually and into the fall months. I expect the news for Space Marine 2 to be ramping up big time. So yeah, stay tuned for more on that. But I also leave it to you guys. What would you guys like to see for me to cover But I also wanted to ask you guys, what other games would you guys like to see me cover? Please sound off. But as always, I like to ask you guys one question at the end of my videos if you make it to the end of the video. What other games would you guys like to see me cover here on the channel? You know, I've been looking at Battlefield 6. That one, I've had a total blast in the beta. But there's also some other things I'm eyeballing here as we head into fall, which would be a lot of fun to cover. But I want to let you guys know, I definitely want your opinion on that one. But thanks, guys, so much for watching. Stay tuned here for more Space Marine 2 and open world gaming goodness, and I will see you all next time. Take care.